Imagine that you have a long set of data that has multiple sections within it that you want to graph independently. How would you do this? Well, if you're in a spreadsheet, you'd probably click and drag each section and make a graph, and then click and drag another section and make another graph, and again and again. And I don't know about you, but if I had to do this one or two times, maybe not too bad. But if I had to repeat this over and over again, it's going to start to feel really tedious. Hi, I'm Pamela Schultz, and in this video, you're going to learn a no-code approach using DataGraph for macOS to dynamically create a series of graphs where the data, the titles, and the labels all change dynamically. And if you're interested in this approach, you can do this today. You do need DataGraph for macOS, but once you have it, you can download the data and follow along with us step by step. The first 20 minutes of the video are showing you how to take this data set and get it into this format where you can dynamically scrub through the data and create all these graphs automatically at once. The next part is going to show you some data wrangling approaches within DataGraph because data isn't always presented immediately in the format that you need it for this type of an approach. And then after that, we're going to do a little bit more demoing of 5.4 and also answer some questions. This is the third webinar we've done in our fall 2024 series, the first one featuring DataGraph 5.4. So here it is, creating dynamic graphs using DataGraph. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today. I think this is going to be a useful webinar. This was actually inspired by a question that we had at the end of our last webinar, which was about how to have the titles from a graph change based on what's in the data table. For those of you who have experience with DataGraph, you probably understand what this question means, but if you don't, that's okay. I'm going to go over the basics here. I did just upload actually an example file that I'm going to use during this presentation, and I'm going to do my best to go step by step and show you exactly how I created this file. Let me go ahead and share with you my screen so that you can see the exact file. The file that I just added is right here. This is 50 fake plants. Use this data to learn how to scrub through a data set in one graph. And we're going to use the slider to batch output all these graphs at once. If you want to follow along with me with the data, you can go ahead and open up this file. I generated this data from ChatGPT. It's actually kind of a fun thing to do, to ask it to generate information for you. And so I asked for a list of 50 fake plants, and it gave me a name and description. That's what you see in this file. But the point of this is, again, to look at the graph that I have here. And let me just demonstrate. What is the benefit of this file? Well, here's a slider that goes through and is creating this graphic for all 50 of my fake plants. And I also I made up some random data for this. So you can see that for each plant, I have basically, well, let me back up maybe a little bit. There's two tables in this file. One is the table that you see here. This is a list of all my 50 fake plants, and new in DataGraph 5.4, just out if you have not gotten it yet, is that I can do this. So you can zoom in on the data table, make it a little easier for you to see what is what's in your data table. The other thing that I wanted to show you that's new in DataGraph 5.4, I actually wasn't necessarily planning on adding a description. ChatGPT did that for me. I thought, well, this will be a good way to also illustrate that now when you have a text entry that goes beyond the width of the column, that now the box will expand. And again, you're only going to see this if you've got DataGraph 5.4 going on your computer now. So what else did I want to show you here? Okay, so there's one table that is a table that lists every single plant. And as I said, I have 50 here. This is what I'm making, 50 individual graphs. So to use this technique, You want to have what is sometimes referred to as a lookup table, where you can see a row is going to correspond to each graph that I want to create. And then I have data that's in another table, where I also have an ID column, the same as I had here. Notice each plant that I have also has an ID. But here with this data, I have an ID, and then I have an X column and a Y column. I've also mapped in the name of the plant here. I'll show you how to do that. But that's essentially what you need for this technique to work. You need a table that's your lookup table that will have a list for every graph that you want to create. And then you have the data that corresponds to that. And they're really, to make this convenient for you, you want to have one column that lets you map from one to the next. And in this case, it's this ID column that I have. So in both of these tables, and it's named the same, there's a benefit to doing that in DataGraph. It'll help you map other data. And then I have, again, this slider over here, which goes from set up to go from 0 to 50. And as I change this, it changes the graph that you see. And what is really nice about this is if I want to output all of these graphs at one time, on the slider variable, you can click the gear menu and you will see options, export current graph for all values. Shows you the number 50 because that's the number of graphs that it's going to output. So if I click this, I'm not going to do it right now. You can go ahead and try it. It will create all of these graphs all at once. You won't see this option on a slider that is set to a continuous variable because there'd be just way too many. What numbers do you want? The key to be able to using this is also to having this set to an integer. So that means there are 50 discrete values here and 50 discrete graphs that are being created for me to output this. Now let's go ahead and start actually creating this. And if you want to follow along step by step, here's what I would like you to do. We can just take this data. So I'm going to select my first column, hold the shift key, select into the data. So I'm viewing both of this. You don't need the last column because that's actually a mapped column, but you can get the plant data, the long column of data, and just go ahead and copy that to your clipboard, make a new DataGraph file, and then paste that in. And for any of you who joined a little bit late or didn't see that, this data itself is coming from an online example. So this is an online example that just got uploaded. So if you are in the all section, it'll be at the top. This is also in the data sets section, my 50 fake plants data that I made. So now that I have this file, let me pull the completed one down here in case I need to refer back to it myself. Here we go. So we have this file now that has this data. And first of all, what I'm going to do is just put these in groups similar to they were before. So it's just convenient to have one group. This is going to be my, I'll just call this names here. And here's my data. And if you want to change the color of one of these, you can click the gear menu on the group and you can change the background color like this. Now, for now, let's see, I have my list of things that I want to show you. Okay, so the first thing actually I wanted to do was to show you how to plot all of this data. If you look back into the example file, the first graph is a plot of everything. And to do that, I'm just going to go over to the data, select the X and Y column, and use the plot command to just plot everything here. That gives me this mismatch of lines. Now, one thing that's a good thing maybe to realize that if you wanted to actually plot each one of these as a line where this would be one set of data, and then this would be my next set of data, and so forth, where as the IDs change, you can actually, within the plot command, say connect every point and change that to when X increases. What that did is it really does now make each ID an individual line. So it's changing, it's not drawing the pen back and forth with this whole set of data. It's letting it know to start a new line as X changes. But I don't want to have all the data. I want to have a smaller set of data. How do I do that? That's going to use a mask. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I might as well just do a couple of formatting things here. We can add the X label. We can add the Y label with tokens. And, but let's keep going because I want to make sure I get into the meat of this. So I'm going to clone this, just like in the example file. But to draw just one line of data, I will go ahead and use a mask, and I'm going to use the ID column that you see here. The use as mask option is right here. This is how we filter the data that's in a particular graph. So I can say I want to select the ID column to base my mask on, and I can pick now whatever number I want to see. So if I change these in my mask, it's going to give me a different set of data. To be able to continuously change from 1 to 50, that's where I'm going to use a slider. Add the slider variable over here in the data panel. Click this button, and then click the top left corner of the slider to expand it out. And by default, the range on this is going to be 0 to 1. I'm going to set this from 1 to 50. And like I said before, you need to make this an integer. Then as I change this, now you see how this, again, changes with integer values. And I'll just call this I think I called it something like select ID. Give it capital. So instead of typing in a number here to change what data is being displayed, I want to use this variable. I'll just go ahead and let's copy that name and paste that in there. Now, when I change my slider, you can see how each of how the line updates. That's what I want. But the question is, well, how do I also change, give this a heading that uses the names that I have here and have that also dynamically change? That's the other part of this that's what I'm going to show you how to do. And for that part, go under the other drop-down menu here over where you create your variables, and you want to select the text from column variable. Go ahead and open that one up. What this does is this allows you to create a text variable where you pull a specific row value from a column. And here, the column I want to pull is the name. So I can select the name column. Now you'll see how this is already pulling one of the values that are in this text column because I have it set to row number 1. If I say row number 3, it's going to change. Row number 6, it's going to change. Whoops. But what I can do is now use this nice slider that I created, and this will also change, right? So now the data is changing and this variable is changing. Just call that variable, oops. Name, there we go. And to use that as my title, this is where I use tokens. So if you're not familiar with this, any text box, I already did this when I created the first graph. Oops, here's the title box. All these text boxes will have a little plus symbol to the right of them that you can click, and you will get a list of what are referred to as token entries that you can add, that you'll show. They're sort of like a text variable of sorts. And here I see my 2 variable names that I created, the select ID or the text name. And I'm going to select name here, hit enter. And there it is. Now I see my, oops, keep hitting the wrong one here. This one right here. Now it says dragon root, and it is something that is going to be dynamic and change as I change this slider. Maybe I'll make this text a little bit bigger. I can make the, the title text here within the canvas settings. I can bump this up a little bit. I think I also maybe put this bold. But now you can see how this is coming together, right? I have my title changing, I have my data changing, and I've got my text here. So the other thing that I did in the other file is the example file is I also added the description. And to do that, I'm going to take this object I already created with the name. I can just copy and paste it to make another one. It gives me an error because I have to give this a different name here. Every variable needs to have a unique name, but instead of the column name, this will be column description. And then I can add a text variable. So this is my text variable here. That again, here's my text entry. I'm going to change this to use the description. Now here's my description of this guy here. And let's put this in the upper center, for example, align this to the center. And now as I change my slider, everything is changing. Actually, let me put this offset to 0, 0. There we go. And what else did I want to say? Oh, okay. So now I have my data, I have my titles. I want now to not, what I want you to notice is as I change this, do you see how the X and Y range are changing as I change the data? If you want that, that's fine. But if you want to have a set of graphs where the X and Y always stay the same, then that tends to be what I often like, where it's not jumping around. So then you can compare really from graph to graph. So the way to do this is to have values that you put in the axis settings in this include in, well, and actually in this case, we're going to do include in Y. You want to put the minimum and the maximum values that you want included in that range. It'll basically treat whatever numbers you type in here as being in the range. So if I wanted this to go from 0 to 10 always, and always include those values, I can just type those in, and now actually 0 to 10 works fine. The way I, in fact, did this in the example file is I used variables for these, and you can do that. That makes it just a little bit more dynamic. So what I did in the example file is I went to my Y value, and I right-click on here, and I can say number from column, give me the maximum, number from column, give me the minimum, and I can use these variables as what goes in the in this include in Y here. So since I could remove the spaces, but we'll just kind of leave them in there, I can put the min Y and the max Y. And now you can see that it's not going to 0 because it doesn't include 0 in the data set. If you wanted it to go to 0, then just 0, comma. Now that's one of the things it's going to include. So it'll always have 0 in that graph. Or not. You don't have to do that. Okay, so what else did I do in the file that you see online? We set the range. We added the text labels. Oh, I wanted it to be a little more colorful than just what you see here. So I put a color scheme in here. And the way that I did this is I wanted to make sure that the color scheme was based on the name of the plant, because I thought that could be more meaningful. And so I need to have a column in my data table that has the name of the plant for each row. And this is where I use the mapping approach within DataGraph. Really easy. All I need to do is go to this ID column. I can right click or two fingers on your touchpad if that's what you're doing, and then say, you go down to the map section, and DataGraph automatically picks up other parts of your data where you have a column of the same name. So it sees that there's another column named ID, which is over here. And sure enough, I can say map the name. Now I'll see the name associated with each one of these. And I'm not going to do this, or to add a color scheme, I need to use the points. The point style for a line plot is going to always have the same color. But I can, one shortcut is click this gear menu, then say use in points. There we go. And then in here, now this has the same mask and everything, so that's convenient. But I'm going to change now the fill style. Instead of being uniform, we'll change this to be based on the name that's associated with each point in the data. You can create a brand new color scheme. And you see it adds it down into here, into the variable section. Now, for many cases, the color scheme will automatically populate because there's so many options here. It actually doesn't do it. You just have to go into the gear menu here and say unique text values. And it just added a unique color that I can assign to each plant. Now, I don't want to assign them each individually, so I'm going to use the color suggestions. And now you see there's these different color ramps that I can use. Let's just pick the good old rainbow color ramp, make this point a little bigger here. And this is kind of just in some ways for show. Now you can see how every time I change this, I'm getting a different color. And if I really wanted plant number 1 to have a particular color associated with it. Now here, these are not by number, these are by ordered automatically by alphabetical. I could change this one to have some specific color. There'd be a lot of colors to set individually, but you could do it if you really wanted to have a color that comes from that color scheme. Probably more useful actually would be to have different categories of plants and to have a different color based on the category. You certainly could do that too. That would be another way to look at this. But in any case, hopefully you can see how you could use the map, how I can change the color, and how this all fits together. So none of these steps are necessarily that difficult in and of themselves. We're just pulling each one of these different steps together to make this dynamic graph that you see here. I did a little bit of formatting on the text, actually, in the one that's in your examples, because you can see here how this text is overflowing the graph. I went ahead and gave my graph a size. I set the text size to something a little more reasonable. And then my text here, I bumped down the font of this a little. And I think I also placed it above the graph, but you could have it inside the box as well, either way. So that looks a little bit better in terms of formatting. One thing that I will show you that I thought was important to maybe talk about is that I gave you this nice formed data set where I already had this list of names set up and I had the data table set up. But what if you don't have the data already set up like that? And let's see, here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. So look at this. This is similar to what people have when they get a data set. This is the same data in terms of the X and Y columns and the plant type. But notice this is opposite of what I showed you before. Well, maybe not opposite, but this is only the data. There's no ID here. It's just the name of the plant and the X and the Y. And in fact, I think this is just really common that people will have data sets more like this. So what I want to show you is how you can use DataGraph to manipulate this to pretty quickly get the format that you see here, where you have this lookup table with the names of the plants. Now, one really quick way is that you can take a column like this, and I can say, right-click on it, copy unique entries, and then add a new text column. And then I could just paste that in, and now I have 1 to 50 plants. So I could put an ID on this. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. Or I could type in 1, 2, 3. And if I want to fill this out, you can actually just, let's see, select here. Oops. There we go. Select the whole row, right click. Sorry, right click on the header. And then I can say set select rows to 1, 2, 3. It'll fill this all in down to 50. So now I have a lookup table. This has, oh, this is my names. Sorry. I wanted to say this is ID. There it is, 1 to 50. The only thing here is that if you really wanted the order that you see here, this little visual, there we go. If you wanted to have the same order that you see here, this alphabetized it when it pasted those in. So I could use this, and I could then, again, I could use the name now to map the ID, right? So now I have the ID number associated with each of these. So this could work. I now have a lookup table and I have a data table. I have a way to map between the 2 of them. But let me show you another technique that I think could be useful. I'm going to just actually undo everything I did here and just get rid of that. So another thing that I find handy when I've done this before is to actually take this name, and there's a way to very quickly map these names into numbers. So if I want the sequence to be exactly the same as here, I don't want to alphabetize them, I can go into the text column and look at the options for this text column, and the only option you see is an option of values. So I can change this to my sequence number instead of none. And if you want to go ahead and just try this, and you'd click on the display here. So you see how now the column name actually can be used in places where you use text or in places where you need a number. And it shows you the number that it's going to use for each of these names. So what I've done is take an expression column, and then I can use I just typed in this name right here, which again, if I wasn't mapping it to a value, this wouldn't work. But since I mapped it to a sequence, it's returning for me that number. This will end up being my ID. Now I can take this, and instead of it being expression, I want this to be a fixed ID. I'm going to convert this to a number column. Now I've got an ID for each of my plants. Now what I'm going to do is let's put this data into one table. So here's my data. And hide that for a second. Now I can use my expression column to just generate a list of numbers. I just type the expression in where I just use the row number itself, enter the hashtag, hit enter. Here we want 50 of them. So there's my 1 to 50. This is also my ID. Again, I'll fix this to, I just want the number. So let's just convert it to a number column. There's my 1 to 50. And now, since I have my data here, again, use the mapping. Right click on this column, map to the name. And now I have this table that has just what I want, IDs and the names. There's one more step here. And this is what again, it's a number of manipulations, but you're doing this all rather than manually typing this in. It's just much easier I feel like, to use these techniques to create this lookup table for me. So I'm going to take this column, and now I want this to just, again, be text. I want this to be where I save the names of each of my plants. And I'll show you in a moment why I think that's the way to go. So what you can do here to convert this to text, I'm surprised actually, and this is something I need to check. It doesn't have the option here if I right click on this column, but that's okay. I can just do copy as text. So if you select this column, go to edit, copy as text, and then do an edit paste, it makes a new column where now this is text, just like any other text you would type in. Now I don't need this mapped column anymore. I'm just going to delete that. So here I go. I've got now my ID, my name, and the name that's here. I don't want that one. I'm going to just delete that. And now map using this one in the data to map the name. And the reason why this is a good way to go is that if I decide I want to change one of these names because it was mistyped, or maybe I want to put a space here between star and blossom, I can type that in one spot, and then everywhere where I have that name, now it's updated. So this is very much a database approach to using this data and manipulating this data, so that I'm efficiently able to have a table where my names are just in one column. And if I need to change them, I can change them here. But if I need to use them for anything, like I did in my example file, using them for the color scheme, then I can also put this here. Now, say you did have flowers that were in a certain category, then again, I can have my category here. I'll just make something up. We'll say these are A, these are B, and these are C. And then I don't have to type all of these. I'm kind of making up data. There's this handy right click on the column, fill empty rows with previous non-empty row. Now each one gets a category. So again, if I want to see what category each one is here, what do? I just right click, map this, show me the category, and now it has that as well. We now have out DataGraph 5.4. You've seen a couple of things here where, again, you can now kind of zoom in on the data, which I think is a nice thing to add. And the other part of this is, it's not only zooming in on the data. If you want to just see, if you have a really big set of data, then, you get this kind of a bird's eye view of it. I think it's a really handy tool for being able to look at a lot of data. And if you have a lot of data columns and you just want to see what is in there, you obviously can't see the individual values, but you can get a sense of a data set in a way that I think is really nice. We're not going to have a webinar the next 2 weeks. I'm going to come back the week after that. And this is being recorded, so I will have this. You will be able to see this. I'm going to answer one of the questions there. We're going to do some shorter videos over the next couple of weeks, highlighting some of the features in DataGraph 5.4. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to share with you on that. I guess that was kind of it. So let's see. Missed the beginning. Please remind how data should be structured when first starting to graph. The long form is better. Yes, the long form is better. So in terms of the data structure for this, so what I think you may have missed was that essentially what you need to use this technique, and that's in this right, this file. Here we go. Yeah, this is the one that's online. So you can get this file under the online examples. If you didn't see this, 50 fake plants is the name of this file. But you have to have a table that has all the data that is in, and that is a good thing to, oops, I mean to hide that one too, to point out that the format of this data is a long format so that I can use the masks to filter the data as I need. And in this case, using the name and the ID also as part of the way that I can filter an individual data set that's going on to this. One thing that I always like to point out, I didn't do this earlier, but I'll do it again. If you have data where it's going across many, many columns and you want to flatten it into this long format, then there's a data flatten columns option. If you go into our community forum and go to the knowledge base, what you can do is you can, actually I wanted to show you this. Let me back up 1 second. I'll show you that in 1 minute. This is actually the page that I meant to show this to you. I meant to share this with you. I'm going to put this on the chat. There we go. This batch exporting is, again, something that I think is really handy. And this shows you how you can do it both using the slider variables, as I'm doing in this file, but also, oh, and actually this doesn't need to say beta version anymore. This is released this is in the release version. But in the text menu also does this so that you can export a batch of files all at once. But flattening data, if you go how to flatten, go into the online reference manual, here's a page that gives you an example of going from a wide format to the flattened format. And you do this in DataGraph in just one step. So this is an old UI, but you can still see it works exactly the same. You select the columns, go to data, flatten columns, and then you get it in that format. But you do need to have both tables. You need this long table that has all the data in it, and then you need a table that's going to list basically one row for each graph is what I'm doing here so that I can scrub through these. And I think what I'll do, maybe the last thing, I think I should be able to show you this easily. If I just want to really let you see what this is going to do. So if I go to the gear menu and I say export graph for all values, it's got these other two options here. These are kind of flagged graphs. It is a flag. You can choose flagged graphs or all graphs where this variable is used. In this case, it's a simple file, so it really only needs this one. But then it's going to show me my Finder. If I want to specify the type of file, then click the Show Options button here. I'm going to output these as a PDF. That's fine. What I tend to do is when I'm outputting a batch of files, I will put them in their own folder, though you don't have to do this. But now that I've added the folder, if I then click Open, it just output all of them. So if I can go, let me open up my Finder again and show you what it did. So here's my folder that I created. And there it is. Here's my 50 graphs that I can, oops, but it wouldn't let me go through these. Can I? Yeah. No, I guess it wants me to do preview, and I don't want to do that because I think it's going to, maybe this is something with Zoom. I don't know. When I was doing this myself earlier, it was letting me just use the left and right arrow keys to move through them. But in any case, there I have it. So I have 50 files that I output all at once. And what it did is it took the name of the file, of the thumbnail. This thumbnail is called flowers, and then it appended the value of the slider variable that corresponded to each one. So if this is this one here, then you can go to 25. You can see which one that is. Actually, that was a good suggestion. That was just suggestion. Change the viewer so you can see the thumbnails. Yeah, why not? You know, I tend not to be an icon type of person, but this is definitely a good time to show this. So you can see each of the files and all 50 of them all being output as one. Yeah, I think that, or maybe in columns, show the icons. Anyway, I think you get the idea. Okay, so let me give a minute in case there are just any other questions that come up, but hopefully this is something that I don't know if it's possible to really follow along in real time while I'm doing this, but this video, I made sure this one was being recorded, so we'll put this up on YouTube, and I think that's it. So thanks so much, everyone, for participating today, for coming to the webinar, and look forward to seeing you again again, we're going to take 2 weeks off and then come back with another 3 weeks of webinars. And we'll probably put out a schedule because we're planning 10 webinars for this fall series that we're doing. But we'll have some other shorter videos on DataGraph 5.4. So that's great. Thanks again.